welcome everybody this afternoon to this meeting of the APPG. I'm Julie Elliott, for those of you who don't know me. I'm the chair of this all-party group. And it's been pulled together very quickly, which, as ever, we want to thank Joe and Chris from CARBU for organising this meeting. And it's been pulled together because of the designation of the 6 NGOs as of the 22nd of October, and then the further designation in the West Bank as of the 7th of November. This is clearly an attack on Palestinian civil society. It is a hugely, hugely worrying situation. We've got 3 speakers from 3 different organisations to talk to us today, and then there will be an opportunity for questions at the end of that. So either indicate in the chat or by raising your hand, and do that throughout, so that we've got a body of people who want to ask questions as and when we get to that point. But first, have we got, oh, the bells go. It's always timing. Have we got Christian Benedict from Amnesty on the line, first of all?
You have, yeah. I'm sorry if my connection is a bit sketchy. It has been all day.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's just for some reason everybody isn't showing up on my screen, but it's always the same when you're chairing the meeting. So I'm going to hand to Christian for a few moments, who's from Amnesty, to say a few words. Then we'll go into the 3 speakers from the 3 organisations. So
thanks, Julie, and thanks Joe and Chris and colleagues at CARBU for organising this important briefing. In solidarity with our friends from Palestine, we at Amnesty have been clear that this appalling and unjust decision is an attack by the Israeli government on the entire international human rights movement, and we've made that very clear to Foreign Office officials as well. The decision by Israel, I mean, it is an alarming escalation. These attacks have been going on for decades, but this is an alarming escalation, and it is an attempt to shut down the work of what are Palestine's most prominent civil society organizations. And I have to say as well, it's also a decades-long failure of the international community that has got us to this situation, a failure to challenge Israel's war crimes and crimes against humanity and impose meaningful consequences, which has essentially emboldened the current Israeli authorities to act in this outrageous manner. So how the international community, including the UK government, responds will be a true test of its resolve to protect human rights defenders. So far, the response has been pretty lackluster, and that's putting it mildly. So we at Amnesty will continue to stand in solidarity with our Palestinian partners. We have been doing for decades, and we will continue to do that. But I don't want to take up any much more time. I'm looking forward to hearing from our colleagues. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christian, for that introduction. And we were going to be addressed by Shawan Jabaran, the Al-Haq's General Director, but unfortunately he's been called to an urgent meeting. So we've got Susan Power, who is head of international advocacy team at Al-Haq, who's going to talk to us first. Susan, over to you. Is Susan there? No? Well, look, let's move to one of our other speakers, and we'll come back to Susan. There's clearly some technical problems going on. So we'll move to Sahara Francis, who is the General Director of Ramallah-based Addameer Prisoner Support and Human Rights Association. Sahar, over to you. Hopefully we can hear you.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Hello.
Very
Is it
much.
okay?
Yes, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for organizing this brief. It's very, very important for us to discuss openly about this last designation. It's really, and I agree with Christian that it's not just against the Palestinian human rights community and civil society. It's actually an attack against all human rights activists, especially those who are supporting the Palestinian cause. And this latest development came after long years of attack against these 6 organizations and other Palestinian organizations from very right Israeli wing groups like NGO Monitor, UK Lawyers for Israel, UN Watch, and other groups that the Israeli government, and we were suspecting all the time that these groups are associated with the Israeli government. And at the end, the Israeli government, the previous one, founded the Strategic Affairs Ministry that actually also shared in attacking the Palestinian NGOs, where their reports claiming that we are terrorists in suits. So, and because all these efforts failed actually to silence us, failed to cause our funders and our supporters to be afraid from working with us and keep supporting our causes, they came into this final step of declaring us using the Israeli law for anti-terror law of 2016 to declare about us as terrorist organizations. And just a couple of days ago, they also signed the military order in order to make it easier from legal point of the military order practice for them to raid our offices, to confiscate our properties, including freezing our bank accounts and taking the money and arresting the people who works with the organization in the occupied territories. Because just based on the Israeli law, they were not going to implement the Israeli law directly into the occupied territories. So it's just kind of a formal thing that they did yesterday, but the same, it would lead for the same consequences. And we keep highlighting that the whole step was actually against the international level, especially the countries and the donors who supported these organizations, because all of the other efforts failed, especially what happened in last May. And I wanted to focus and highlight this secret report that Israel submitted to the EU countries and was published in the Israeli media in the weekend, actually. This report, we were aware, at least me as a lawyer working in Addameer, representing Palestinian prisoners for so long in front of the Israeli military system, we were following the case of the employees who were arrested from the healthcare committees. And we knew the confessions, basically these confessions that they were used in this report. So what the Israeli security forces did, they picked and chose some sentences from the whole material that they have, and they drafted in a way that it would be convincing for any external side that these organizations are associated with terrorism. And of course, the response of the EU was that this is not serious, we are not going to rely on it. And actually now claiming that they have more evidences, I don't think they have more information in order to present it. And this is why we, as well as organizations, when we discussed what we want to do on the legal level internally, we decided we are not going to appeal or petition this decision in front of the Israeli High Court or in the military system, because we know what would be the response, especially relying on secret information. We don't expect that this would be just a due process that would result in a positive answer for us as 6 organizations. And from previous experience, especially with the High Court, we know that the High Court was all the way along all these years of occupation actually legalizing the policies of the government. And this is why we choose the campaign and the political pressure and the work on the international level, demanding our partners and the states to take their responsibility actually, and not to rely on these secret evidences or other confessions that they were obtained by torture, ill treatment, and other violations for the detainees' rights. Actually, this is the work that Addameer was trying to promote for 30 years now, that the whole military system couldn't be, in the context of the occupation, couldn't be a fair trial procedures, that you would prosecute thousands of civilians every year in front of this military system that lacks the minimum of the due process and fair trial standards. And let me remind you that in 2012, a distinguished UK group composed of lawyers and ex-judges and experts and parliamentarians were visiting the military court, and they came out with a very critical report about the system, and with more than 40 recommendations for the UK government how to react on this. Not much change happened on the system. All the changes that they did actually in order to look for outside that they are really implementing a justice system, but in fact on the ground they kept most of the violations that they were doing in the process of the arrest and the imprisonment against Palestinian detainees. And we're like Addameer, we're working on the field since 30 years now. And why now? Like, why now you discovered that we are affiliated with one group, or we're acting in illegal way? I think it has nothing to do with the facts on the ground. It has to do with our work and our advocacy and our efforts on the international level. As all the other colleagues, the 6 and other Palestinian NGOs, because in the last couple of years, we are focusing a lot in the international level on the accountability work versus the UN system versus the International Criminal Court, and especially the International Criminal Court, and focusing on the accountability that it cannot be tolerated anymore, that all these violations are not questioned or investigated by the international community, and Israel is always benefiting from immunity, total immunity. So I think because we started to focus on the apartheid elements of this occupation, about the colonialist aspects of this occupation via the settlements, the annexation processes that they are implementing, and so on, this is why we are attacked. I would stop here because I think it's very important to have a discussion and really to focus more on your concerns and the question how you can support us.
Thank you very much, Sahar. And I think that's a very moot point that you made there. Why now, after 30 years? Clearly, your organisation is doing some good work and being effective, I would suggest. But thank you very much. I think Susan is with us now, Susan Power. I did see her a moment ago. Is Susan there?
I am indeed. Thanks very much. And apologies,
Susan, I'm just wondering.
My internet seems to be cutting out every now and then, so apologies.
Would you like to switch your camera off, just because that sometimes makes it a little better to hear, and we'll have a go.
Is this any better?
Yes, that is better. Thanks. Thank you. Over to you, Susan.
Thanks very much. And thank you for the invitation to speak as well. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you for the invitation to speak today. And I'm here today to represent Al-Haq as one of, thank you, as one of the 6 civil society organizations smeared as terror organizations by Israel, the others being Addameer Prisoner Support and Human Rights Association, Bizan Center for Research and Development, the Defence for Children International Palestine, and the Union of Agricultural Workers Work Committees, and the Union of Palestinian Women's Committees. Together, our organizations have a combined 150 years of experience working for Palestinian rights. And just to give some context about the work of Al-Haq was established in 1979 to monitor and document violations of human rights and humanitarian law in Palestine, regardless of the perpetrator. In our work, we document and record violations of law against the Palestinian people, both by the Israeli occupying authorities and also by the Palestinian Authority. Our work includes engaging with UN mechanisms, submitting to UN special procedures, engaging with the Human Rights Council, also advocacy to third states, legal research and accountability work. More recently, our work has included 6 core joint communities providing evidence of war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by individuals in the Israeli army and the Israeli authorities against Palestinian victims in the occupied Palestinian territory. Israel systematically denies international access to the occupied Palestinian territory, including UN special rapporteurs, investigators from the commissions of inquiry and fact-finding missions, and even preventing visas to the staff of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in the occupied territory. And this means that international human rights fact-finding missions and criminal investigators, such as at the International Criminal Court, rely on Al-Haq as one of the leading and longest established Palestinian human rights organizations to coordinate and provide the international community with the requisite documentation of Israeli crimes, including indiscriminate killings of civilians, torture practices, property appropriations, house demolitions, forcible population transfer, and mass arrests and detentions, as well as acts of persecution and apartheid. Another core strand of our organization's work is in business and human rights, in particular corporate accountability and advocacy. For Al-Haq, one of the main issues pertaining to Israel's escalating and aggressive settlement expansion is the presence of Israeli and international corporations such as Booking.com, Ahava, and Heidelberg Cement, for example, who are incentivized by Israel to locate in the occupied territory, to commercially exploit Palestinian lands and natural resources for private commercial profits, and to sustain the employment of illegally transferred in Israeli settlers. For Palestinian civil society, it is imperative that third states prohibit the import of illegal settlement goods and services into their jurisdictions and to adopt legislation like the Irish Occupied Territories Bill. But we would also like to point out that Al-Haq is the recipient of 11 international human rights awards, including the 2010 Quzmar Prize for Human Rights Defenders, the 2018 Human Rights Prize of the French Republic, the 2019 Human Rights and Business Award awarded at the UN in Geneva, and in 2020, the Gwyn Skinner Human Rights Award for Corporate Accountability. And over the years, we have forged important links with the United Kingdom, hosting research fellows and interns, and we have hosted law clinics with the University of Essex. And currently, we have a law clinic with Open Justice Centre at the Open University. And some of our legal team are also currently working remotely from the UK. But it is because of this human rights work that Israel has targeted our staff and our organization with a smear campaign of delegitimization, including death threats against General Director Shawan Jabarin and legal researcher Nada Kiswanson for our work at the International Criminal Court. Prosecutor Bensouda, in her 2016 report on preliminary examinations, noted that staff members of certain organizations that have gathered information of relevance to the Office of the Prosecutor preliminary examination, such as Al-Haq and Al-Mizan, have been subjected to threats and other apparent acts of intimidation and interference. And they said that the situation had been taken very seriously, including at the level of the Dutch authorities as the host state to the court. Since then, Israel has tried to cut off the funding of our organizations and even established a ministry whose sole purpose is to smear Palestinian human rights organizations working with the court, insinuating links to terrorism and presenting their reports to European funders. The most egregious of these was published by the Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs in 2018 and 2019, including the money trail and terrorists in suits. Those reports contain a number of defamatory attacks against the human rights organizations. And more pointedly, these reports call on the European Union and European states to stop their direct and indirect financial support and funding to the Palestinian and international human rights organizations. For Al-Haq, we understand that this campaign of smears is part of Israel's systematic policy of silencing and opposition to maintaining its apartheid regime over the Palestinian people as a whole. And one of the elements of the crime of apartheid under Article 2F of the Apartheid Convention is the persecution of organizations and persons by depriving them of fundamental rights and freedoms because they oppose apartheid. It is this work which has led Israel on the 19th of October to designate our organization, along with the 5 others, as terrorist organizations under its counter-terrorism law. The accusations against Al-Haq are directly related to our international advocacy work, or as designation order 373 states, directly the promotion of steps against Israel in the international arena, which according to Israel constitutes part of the terror organization's struggle against Israel. As the head of the International Legal Research and Advocacy Department, I personally authorize, direct, and manage the execution of this international work at Al-Haq. Yesterday, we found out that on the 3rd of November, the Israeli military commander in the West Bank had issued a military order giving effect to the designation in the occupied territory. And this means that our offices can be raided by the army, our staff can be arrested and put on trial in military courts, our funds and salaries and property can be seized. This is all because of our international human rights work. Israel has based these designations on a shambolic and discredited 74-page document of evidence, some of which was obtained from Palestinians who work in a completely unrelated organization and who were subject to very grave interrogation practices prohibited under international law as torture. In May, Israel shared the document with EU member state partners in an attempt to halt the funding of our organizations. This 74-page document was met with complete skepticism by EU member states at the time. And since then, Ireland's Minister for Foreign Affairs, Simon Coveney, has derided the allegations as not being substantiated. When the member states decided to continue their funding of Al-Haq and the partner organizations, Israel responded by designating the organizations as terror organizations under its domestic law and military order. And this is to prevent and starve the funding of our organizations, to target the banks and financial institutions and the flow of money into our accounts, to outlaw our organizations and prevent them from functioning, and to prevent them from reporting on Israel's international law violations. Today, it was revealed by frontline defenders that 6 staff members of the 6 organizations have since July 2020 been placed under spyware surveillance by Israeli spyware company Pegasus. So why is Israel escalating the attacks on our organizations now when we have been operating in the West Bank since 1979? Well, after 54 years of military occupation and due to the failure of the international community to intervene with sanctions and concrete measures, we are now entering the final and completing stages of Israel's colonization project. There are now over 700,000 illegally transferred in settlers living in 300 settlements in the West Bank. Right now, today, Israel is advancing plans to colonize the E1 area in the Jerusalem belt. Right now, today, Israel's Ministry of Justice is implementing the mandatory registration of lands for the occupied eastern part of Jerusalem in a massive land appropriation scheme of absentee Palestinian property, which the office explains is the first practical application of sovereignty since the state of Israel's decisions to extend its sovereignty to East Jerusalem in 1967. Our demands are past words of condemnation. We need international action. We need the prosecution of Israeli criminals at the International Criminal Court. We need the legal framework of apartheid to be applied. We need third states to stop trading in illegal settlement products. This is why Israel is targeting our organizations as terror organizations. While we appreciate statements of support internationally, we are deeply concerned with the response of the British Minister of State for Middle East and North Africa, James Cleverly, to parliamentary questions which deferred to Israel, stating that the UK's relationship with Israel is strong and important, and the strength of that relationship allows us to raise sensitive issues. We will be speaking to our friends and colleagues in the Israeli government about the reasons why they felt they needed to designate those organizations. For Al-Haq, this is simply not good enough. The time for deferring is over. We need concrete actions. We therefore call on UK parliamentarians to use their leverage with Israel to pressure Israel's Minister of Defense to urgently rescind the designations, to work with European and third states to issue a statement condemning and not recognizing the terror designations, to publish a bulletin to banks and financial institutions, putting them on notice to dismiss as inapplicable Israel's terror designations, for the UK to remove terrorism clauses as internal conditions placed on donor funding of civil society organizations, for the UK to discontinue the UK-Israel Trade and Partnership Agreement, for the UK to introduce domestic legislation to prohibit the sale of settlement goods and services, and for the UK to take concrete and immediate measures to end Israel's prolonged occupation of the Palestinian territory, to bring to an end the apartheid regime over the Palestinian people since 1948, to ensure effective remedy and redress for all Palestinians,
Susan,
including,
if you could start and conclude your remarks, because we've got a couple of other speakers to bring in.
Indeed, including the right of self-determination and the right of Palestinian refugees and exiles in the diaspora to return to their homes in Palestine. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Susan. Sorry I had to interrupt. We heard you loud and clear with your camera off. Thanks for that. I'm going to come to Khalid Kusmar next, who is General Director of Defence for Children International in Palestine. Are you? Yeah, you're there, Khalid. Lovely. Over to you.
Thank you, Julie. And thanks for inviting us to this great event. I'll try to be short and not to repeat what my colleagues talked about, but I would like to start by saying that the attacks against the civil society, the six organization, is part of the shrinking civic space that we are living in. Palestinian human rights organizations, civil society organizations, international human rights organizations, even the Israeli human rights organization are also living under such circumstances and subject to different attacks from the Israeli right-wing groups and also from the Israeli government, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Strategic Affairs. So now we are talking about six organizations. The six organizations, as my colleagues mentioned, the youngest one is about 30 years old, and Haq, like the first human rights organization in the Middle East, more than 40 years. So these organizations are very active, working in different sectors like human rights, children's rights, prisoners' rights, political prisoners, with agriculture, with women's. So they target the effective organizations, and I'm sure if this decision will pass, then others will follow from the local level and from the international level, and including the Israeli organizations. So Israel, according to our experience with this system, designed the space for each organization to work, to give services, to keep silent without touching like the red lines that they did for us. Like, you can give services as much as you want, but don't talk about exposed Israeli policies outside. Don't talk about accountability. Don't work for the accountability. Don't cooperate with the ICC. Don't go to parliamentarians like what we did as DCI in the Congress. So these actions considered from the Israeli side that we crossed the red lines, and then I believe that this is why they attacked us. In DCI Palestine, we used to receive such attacks started since more than 10 years. But the most attacks we used to receive is from the UK. There is in the UK, there is called UK Lawyers for Israel. They were targeting us every week, sometimes every month, targeting all our partners to treat them not to work with DCI. And because we believe that what we are doing is according to our mission, according to the international law, according to the Child Rights Convention. So we challenge them in the UK legal system. But because we are foreigners, we are complained as a foreigners, the law forces us to put as a guarantee in the court for amount of £500,000 to be in the court. And as DCI, we never managed to have such an amount for this prosecution. So we managed to reach a settlement, and the settlement was to silence them. Since they were all their work is to silence us, we managed to silence them, and they put in their website that they used to attack DCI, to talk about DCI, but now they have no problem with DCI structure, with DCI stuff, with DCI. So since that time, since 2019 until now, no attacks from UK lawyers, but other Israeli organizations. So Israel, from different levels, they failed to convince our partners to stop working with us. It failed to silence us. Then the action came in 2021 in July. They raided our office, they confiscated computers, and from the first day, we complain against them in Israeli military court system. Why we believe that there is no justice in the system, but we complain there. Until now, there is no answer. Today, I received the answer that the Israeli military court, appeal military court, they rejected our appeal because the Israeli commander designated DCI as an illegal organization. So they do not answer even the question that we ask, why you are targeting us, why you are raided our office. So as my colleague said, to challenge the Israeli process inside the Israeli military system, even in the Israeli civil system, is no justice. Just if we go to this road as a conclusion, it will be kind of legitimating the decision and the illegal decision that they took against us. So what happened yesterday, that they announced about the designation from the Israeli military commander, the military order to consider these organizations as illegal. It is a very dangerous decision, and this decision maybe cause the arresting of the staff, closing the organization, confiscate the properties of the organization. So it's open, and now I can't say I consider it as a different step of the escalation against us. So this, I don't want to repeat the demands that my colleague Susan present. So I agree with all of them that we need now concrete action to force Israel to reverse from the decision that they took in the Israeli, the military one, and the one from the Israeli Minister of Defense, and we need a protection. Now all the staff are under threat. Maybe they will be arrested, maybe they will raid the offices, maybe they will come and confiscate, close the office. So we need protection, we need intervention from the international community, and started from the UK always supporting Israel, self-defense. Which kind of self-defense? By attacking human rights organizations, by attacking and confiscating the computers that we are working with. So Israeli propaganda is not accepted from all those who are when they share the secret information about the designation or behind the designation. So now concrete action is should be from EU states and from EU. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Khalid. That That was very, very illuminating what you had to say with us then. I'm just going to ask if any of the other NGOs on the call want to make a small contribution. I'm wondering, Rohan, if you would like to say anything from Medical Aid from Palestinians, if there's anyone else as well that they could indicate before I ask everyone to indicate to ask a question. Rohan.
Thank you, Julie. And I'd also just like to say a really big thank you and send Medical Aid for Palestinians solidarity to Sahar, Susan, Khaled, and everyone else at the organizations. We know how immense the pressure is on you, and we're worried for you, but I'm glad that there's a group here who are here to support and try and find ways to support you. The only things I want to highlight are firstly just to emphasize the issues that Susan raised with the UK government's reaction, which is typical, I think, unfortunately, of not just this case, but other cases where whenever something like this highlights a clear violation of Israel's obligations, whether it's about its military actions or its clampdown on civil society, we get the same message from the minister or from the government, which is, well, we'll wait and see and we'll seek clarification, not even extending to the point of condemnation, never mind actual concrete action. And that wait and see always just dissipates, and there's never anything out the other side. It's a way to try and diffuse and deflect in the hope that the situation will go away. But so imminent and clearly important are the risks to these organizations and all of you working there, that we know that something much further needs to be done. The only thing I'd like to just raise and emphasize is the support that Medical Aid for Palestinians and many other UK-based charities have provided through a joint statement. It's not just us, it's international civil society, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, UN bodies, etc., have shared their outrage and the need for action. The UK is lagging behind, and it's exposing people to risks that they shouldn't be exposed to. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rohan. I'm going to bring in Wayne David next, then Richard Burden. Wayne.
Well, it is just a straightforward question, really, because Susan mentioned the 74-page scholarless document which has been submitted to the European Union and a response to it. I was just wondering if the same document has been submitted to the British government, because when they were asked a question on the floor of the House, it was, as Rowan has said, basically an answer, well, we want to have more information, we'll wait and see, and so on and so forth. So I was just wondering if this document has been supported, because we've been pressing the government to have a response to what evidence, so-called, has been presented to them.
Thank you, Wayne. Richard, you want to come in next, and then I'll go back to the speakers.
Thanks very much, Julie, and thanks to friends who've given us such a useful explanation of what's going on. I'm sure all of us on here would express our full solidarity with you at this time. I'd just like to follow up on the points that Chris Doyle put in the chat and that Rohan has also just said about the international response here. I mean, clearly the response so far from the UK government has been very, very timid and tepid, and that's really to be regretted. But I wonder, can you say any more about if there's been any better practice from any other bodies internationally and countries that we could point to in our dealings with the UK government? And also, I think you had, or at least some of the NGOs had, a meeting with the EU diplomatic representation in Palestine, which I think the UK Consul General or the Consul General's representative was also there. If you could say anything about that meeting and anything that came out of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. So I'll go back. I don't know, Sahar, do you want to comment first?
I would start by highlighting that since the UK pulled from the EU, I think the PFLP and the other 6 Palestinian political parties designated by the EU as a terrorist group or terrorist organizations shouldn't be considered so now under the UK. According to my knowledge, the UK didn't issue any decision about like these political parties, Palestinian political parties, to be considered as terrorist organizations, correct? So the whole point of this argument that we are terrorist groups because we are affiliated with the PFLP should be dealt differently in the UK. And in relation to the 74 pages, actually this report, I think, and I believe that it was shared with the UK as well, because actually I believe that most of the countries that they have projects, especially with the Palestinian civil society organizations, received this report and were alerted about the case of the investigation of the employees of the healthcare committees before in March, April, and May in 2021. I would say that legally, it's really very weak information that they are trying to use. And this explains why, instead of waiting to their internal procedures in front of the military court to decide about the accuracy and the authentic of this information in front of the military court, whether these confessions could be accepted as evidences or not, they went to this act where the minister claimed that based on secret information, he decided to designate us. I don't think they have really more powerful legal argument that they can use. Otherwise, they were supposed to present it to their own court and to wait to the decision of their own court before deciding to designate us. I would leave it for Susan if she wants to, about the other aspect of the question.
Thanks, Sahar. Susan, would you like to comment? Thanks.
Thanks very much, and thanks, Sahar, for this as well. Yes, our understanding is that this 74-page document of evidence, that this is the same one that was presented back in May and that was discredited. Our understanding is that there is no additional information or no new supposed evidence since then. So we're still, and this had been discredited by various EU member states back in May, and also more recently by Ireland. There has been some stronger statements by some of the EU member states. Sweden, Ireland, Belgium, and France came out with some strong statements. We also have had very good support from some of our funders, and in particular, the German-based funder Bread for the World, which immediately transferred a payment to Al-Haq to just see and test if the payments were still coming in, which we deeply appreciated. And this was a strong show of support from the German funder, which was great. And the payment did come through. I don't know what the situation will be like now, because we've had the second designation triggered under the military order. So I don't know if that would have a chilling effect on these types of payments. I would say that while the statements of condemnation were quite strong in May, what we're seeing is this kind of deference to Israel and this lag in condemnation, and waiting for Israel to kind of show if more evidence comes up. And really these delays are very, very damaging. And for us, the EU response is damaging, and also the UK response is damaging, because Israel is hiding behind these delays. The object for Israel is to completely dismantle civil society, and this will have a contagion effect right across civil society as well. These are the most established organizations of Palestinian civil society and human rights. By decimating these organizations, we're really not just shrinking space in Palestinian society, we are erasing every last bit of space there is to speak out against these international crimes. So it is really important that we get a very strong response, and ideally some concrete steps as well.
Thanks, Susan. Khalid, would you like to comment?
Just a few words about the designation from the Israeli Minister of Defense, which built on according to the anti-terror law 2016, which is not much apply in the occupied territory, but the military order is based on the British emergency law, which is in 1945. Until now, they are using it. But even this system, even this the 74 page report or documents that they shared with the EU and with others, they cannot use it even in the Israeli military court itself. Only they went to the secret file in order to make to expand or to put what they want as failed information and false information and lies. But if they are sure from their information, I'm happy to share it and with us to protect ourselves. But how I can protect myself? Why I don't know what's in the file? So this is, unfortunately, until now, they are using the emergency regulation since 1945. Thanks.
Thank you. We've got a few more people indicating, so I'm going to ask Tony Lloyd to come in first, please.
Yeah, thanks, thanks, Julie. Realistically, what our Palestinian colleagues and those representing them are asking is, what can we do? And I just wonder whether one thing that we should do, because of course we can try and raise this in Parliament, and that's sensible, but I do wonder whether we should seek a meeting with James Cleverly on this issue. And I think sometimes, since I took part in a meeting with the minister on on this, and this now is a potential, well, has all the potentials for a turning point in the way that we even get to learn about the situation facing ordinary Palestinians. So I think it is worthwhile doing that. If you're happy to lead that, I would most certainly be happy to be part of any such meeting.
Thank you, Tony. I'm going to bring in Chris Doyle next, and then Rivka, and then I'll go back to the speakers. Chris.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask a very specific question of the three representatives and thank them very much, of course, for coming and sparing their time today to speak, because it's really tough for them. But prior to the designations, what were your relations like with the British Consul General, the diplomats there, and have you had any contacts with them since the designations on the 22nd of October? Have there been any contact whatsoever? And has there been any funding of projects that the British government has funded in recent years? And has any funding been pulled in any sort of way?
Thank you, Chris. Rivka?
Yes, thanks so much, and thanks to the representatives from all the NGOs. And just to echo everything that everybody has said in terms of the solidarity, I wanted to follow up on the question from Richard and Chris, actually, and it occurs to me that the UK government uses reporting from all of the three NGOs here in its own human rights and democracy reports. So it seems like that's a relevant point. And I wanted to ask again also just about that dossier of evidence, which sounds to me like disinformation actually rather than evidence, and whether it would be useful to have a UK legal expert in conversation with the UK government as well to talk about the inadmissibility of information that comes from confessions under coercion or torture.
Thank you very much, Rivka. Can I go to Susan first this time, and then Khalid, and then Sahar? Thank you. Susan.
Thanks very much. Yes, we have been in contact with the diplomats on the ground in Palestine, and initially we sent out a letter almost immediately. And obviously they're limited a little bit on what they can do, but we have quite good relations actually, and they do visit Al-Haq quite regularly, and we discuss various different things. In terms of funding for projects, right now Al-Haq does not have funding coming from the UK. So our funding is coming from other sources at the moment. And just in relation to Rivka, and just to reinforce what she has said, like we're only hearing about all of these developments secondhand and off the news. So when the tower designation came about 2 weeks ago, we heard about it on the news. We heard about the military order on the news. And to be honest, I do want to say that the atmosphere here it's terrifying. You know, people are really scared. People are scared that their offices are going to be raided. We've stopped working very late into the evening because we don't know if the army is going to push down the door. Like the situation has just nosedived. It's very, very serious. I really want to stress the gravity of that.
Thank you, Susan. It must be terrifying.
Yeah.
We all feel for you. Khalid, next, please.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I will mention 2 occasions that I was in touch with the consulate. In 2019, during the attacks that we used to receive from UKLers for Israel, once I received a call from the consulate, and they talked with me like he was very worried. Don't want to talk anything, just I want to see you urgently. So he came urgent. He came to the office, and I know why he is coming, because I know in that time there was a wave of attacks to all our partners. In that time, we used to receive funding from the consulate. So I told him, you are coming because you received a complaint from the threat from the UK lawyers for Israel. They are talking about A, B, C, D. He shocked. Why? How you know that? I told him, I know because they did it with others. So I shared with him my answers to the other. He asked me not to talk in phone, not to use the internet, just give me the hard copy. I gave him, and after maybe 3-4 hours, he called me. Khaled, don't worry, everything is clear. And the second time, after the raid to the office, they came with other diplomatic missions, and he asked some questions. He showed his concern, his solidarity with us. But unfortunately, still we are waiting. We are looking to see action and concrete action to challenge the Israeli policies, because Israel, when they issued the first decision from the minister and the second one from the Israeli military order, this means that even with all the rejection from the international community to their argument, they are going ahead. They do not care about the international community. So I think they have to receive the clear message from the international community that enough is enough, no more, and international law should be applied for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Khalid. Sahar?
Actually, we're not receiving fund from the UK, but of course, as Susan highlighted, I think on the level of the fear and the tension, of course, all the staff members are so terrified, including myself. We don't know if we would be arrested or not. I just was today trying to calm my team, saying I don't think they would be invading like Ramallah in the middle of the day and entering to the offices. 2 hours after, the soldiers were around the Ramallah Palace Cultural Center, that we have a film festival there, and everyone was sharing the photos of the army in the middle of the day raiding this film festival. How far they can go? Honestly, they can do like anything, and we expect anything, and this is why we demanded protection today, because after also all this news about the fact that they used Pegasus against some of our team members, this is becoming more and more dangerous, how far they can go in this attack against the civil society people and the human rights defenders.
Thank you very much, Sahar. I think Rupa's got one quick question, and then we'll wrap up. Rupa.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a bit late. I had a question in the chamber, but just, sorry, maybe an ignorant and stupid question. Wasn't everyone quite hopeful when the new government had Arab parties, Arab MKs within it, did that not make any difference? And also, just when I went on a delegation in 2017, we met Breaking the Silence, the ex-IDF who sort of spilled the beans on quite unsavoury tactics. They were about to be banned. Did that ever happen?
Okay, thanks, Rupa. Who would like to take that one?
No, they didn't ban Breaking the Silence. Against the Israeli organizations, they have different ways how to try to affect their work. And actually, there's also Israeli laws related to the fund issues and the PDS, and to be associated with PDS, for example, that they can use against Israeli organizations. On the new government, if I get the question correctly, I don't think there's a change. It's even worse. And because I think they have a wider support than the previous government that was relying just on the very right-wing political parties inside Israel. Unfortunately, now Meretz is sitting in this government, and the Arab United group, the Islamist group, actually is sitting in this government. So this government feels that they have more power, more support from all the different spectrums. So far, since they got into power, the things are just deteriorating on the level of settlements and daily attack, evictions from houses in the Sheikh Jarrah and all other these violations, daily attacks on the Palestinian population.
Thank you, Sahar. And as ever, we're running out of time. I think it's very worrying, the situation that the new government seems even worse. I didn't think that was possible. But it's worth saying here that Breaking the Silence, Betaslam, Yeshdin, and other Israeli NGOs have actually come out in support of the 6 Palestinian organisations, which is, very good. I think, there's been a number of things mentioned here, and we've in the chat, quite a few people have liked the suggestion from Tony Lloyd that we try and seek an urgent meeting with James Cleverly. So I think we will do that as the all-party group. We'll get a message over to Cleverly this afternoon to seek an urgent meeting. And I think we can do that on the back of the announcement yesterday, that things are moving at a pace. And we can say we've had this meeting, and that people working for the organisations are frightened of what's going to happen. And it's really for me to say thank you very much to Sahar, Susan and Khalid for giving your time up today to spend with us. We're all very appreciative of your time, and we are with you. We will do whatever we can to try and support you and to try and get this dreadful decision changed. Because civil society should be allowed to operate, and the work that you're all doing is incredibly valuable. Having visited, we've talked about the military courts. I visited them in 2017, and it is the most harrowing experience. I think one of the most harrowing experiences I've ever had visiting the military courts. So, I value, and I know others value enormously, the work you're doing. So I think we will try and seek that meeting, but thank you once again for spending your time this afternoon, and thank you everyone for joining. Good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks so much.